You have such an important role to not only inform, educate, and communicate to audiences, but also to bring people together during this time of global pandemic by promoting our unity in diversity through your reporting. As we all know, media freedom and access to reliable information and factual information is essential to tackling the spread of COVID-19. The new dynamic and challenges posed by this pandemic, accompanied by the proliferation of fake news on digital media platforms, poses serious challenges to journalists and professional media organizations, as well as to individuals, groups, and communities receiving and reacting to this misinformation, hate speech, racism, and cultural divide. I hope with your professionalism and the objectivity that you will bring into reporting, we'll be able to fight this menace. As UNESCO, the focus is always in building peace in the minds of people. And who can do that better but journalists? I would like to emphasize the call by UNSG, Antonio Guterres, to all governments that they should support journalists, and this is a call you have already made yourself, to do their jobs throughout the pandemic and beyond. And I must say, it should not only be even the governments, but partners in general must really begin to show that value add that the media fraternity can bring to the peace we want, to the welfare of the nation, and to the security of all. With a lot of misinformation going on, the press, especially those reporting on public health, is one of the main channels to counter this, as it gives scientific, fact-based news. Over the past years, the regional office has been working with the Ministry of Information, the Media Council of Kenya, academia, non-state actors, among others, to strengthen capacities of journalists on issues related to freedom of expression, safety of journalists, media diversity and pluralism, community radio development, and access to information. Through this webinar conference, to mark the World Press Freedom Day celebrations, UNESCO aims to continue strengthening its cooperation with governments, the media regulatory bodies, journalists, media organizations, and non-state actors. I think during the lighter moments, there were comments about probably the need also to develop capacity of journalists using this new technology as it presents us today. It is going to be the new norm and has been invited by our colleague from Paris, Guillemot. I hope you will be able to also capitalize on courses when they are put up, beginning with the one that was announced to you. We can continue to work with all of you on national follow-up actions in Kenya and the region. We welcome whatever recommendations you'll be putting forward, and we hope together we can plan on continuing this collaboration we've always nurtured. Once again, dear colleagues, the media fraternity, I want to thank you for taking the time to participate today and the joy in which you are doing it. It's always good, even as serious as we may be with work, we find some light moments to feel at ease, because once we can deal with stress, we will be successful. I wish you a successful webinar, and may you and your family stay safe during this crisis. Thank you so very much, and have a blessed day.
Thank you, Anne, Director, UNESCO Regional Office. We appreciate a lot, and thanks. Stay safe. Bwana Omoyo, CEO Media Council of Kenya, karibu sana.
Thank you, Victor, and thank you, colleagues and supporters TI and UNESCO. Let me start with a heavy heart by mourning Mohammed Hassan Marjan, the Pamoja FM presenter newscaster who was killed this morning on his way from work. It's indeed a sad day for the fraternity. And as I said, that a team from our journalist safety is on the way to the ground to find out what is happening. We deeply regret and hope that justice will be done. I am informed that the person who killed him was also killed immediately by the public, but we really hope that there is more security such that journalists on their way to or from work are protected. In very few words, I want to state to colleagues that we really appreciate as the Media Council the work that the media is doing, especially under the COVID-19 situation. We are, however, extremely concerned because of the worsening situation of journalists in the country. Number one, the ranking of Kenya in the World Press Freedom Index has dropped. We are now at position 103 from position 96 last year. And we are barely in April, and we're already reporting 36 incidences. And if we add this one, that makes them 37, which is sadly a death. The COVID-19 pandemic has made it extremely bad. We are extremely disturbed by numbers of our colleagues who are now jobless, and others are facing salary cuts of up to 70%. We hope that united, we will be able to overcome this. Before I mention what MCK and our partners are doing, I want to stress the importance of industry working together, because we are giving space for people, mostly senior people in government and out there, to profile and isolate professional colleagues. It is important that the media industry stands together consistently. The scoop mentality, which will make us look like the killed journalist belongs to this media house, or a journalist who has been harassed belongs to another media house, will allow the oppressors of press freedom here who work in the advertising field, when you agree that an advert is pulled from one paper and taken to another, mostly when you take adverts of people taking space in one media house to condemn a story ran in another media house, I think that is betrayal. I know that we have issues of economy and all that, but it's important that we don't allow a journalist in a media house runs a story, then someone comes and pays for a page or two in another media house to condemn what a professional has done. That is betrayal of the industry. We know that we need the money to run. Consistency and unity, so that we are not then used to fight one another. As the Media Council, we have done a few things, but we apart from the safety guidelines for journalists, we have in the recent past made small grants to journalists under the associations, which allows us to be here. We are very optimistic that we will be able to give direct support to media houses from the coming weeks, especially community media and all that. We are hoping that the people we spoke to hear that. And I need to state that the health travel grants are available. We will be starting the process from tomorrow. Thereafter, we'll be issuing grants weekly for perhaps the next 5 weeks as we look around to get more support. We are also trying to work around psychosocial support so that we get compassion support for journalists. And we want to also support fact-checking errors. We expect that from time to time, there could be an error in judgment, something that as fake news is run. We don't want to use that to condemn the profession, but really to promote and support each other. We are working around, journalists have few challenges accessing workplaces or coming from home. We'll be here with Charles Owino later today. We hope that all works well. So as I conclude and urge guys to communicate with an open heart and proceed, I urge that we have collegiality and unity of purpose, and we support all intentions thereof to make sure that we protect the media fraternity, both individual journalists and media houses, so that we don't lay off staff. We are working around that, and we hope we'll be able to support all employees in existing media houses, despite the difficult circumstances, to be able to work and do their work well. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a fruitful day and deliberations.
Asante sana, Bwana Omoyo, for the wise words. We appreciate a lot. Eric Odur, are you ready with the statement? Eric Odur. SG. The next is a position statement from the industry that has been organized by the various players, which immediately the statement is read, will go to the panel. So Eric. Eric Odur. SG, go ahead, read the statement, please. Sauti.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Eric, sauti yako, bandisha kidogo sauti.
You can hear now?
Yeah,
because I think I was muted. So, are we ready to go?
Yes, please.
So, this is a statement by the media stakeholders on the occasion of World Press Freedom Day 2020. You can hear me?
Hello? Yes.
Unanisikia vizuri? Tuko sawa? Tuendelee.
And the statement will be sent later to all the colleagues.
Okay. As we mark the 2020 World Press Freedom Day with the theme Journalism Without Fear or Favor, Kenya media sector players note with great concern the rising trend of press freedom violations witnessed in 2019 and continue in 2020. That Kenya's press freedom situation has actually worsened if we go by the World Press Freedom Day ranking by Reporters Without Borders, that actually we dropped from position 96 to position 1 of 3. Sector players are concerned about the increasing hostile working environment that is increasingly making the work of professional and independent journalism a challenge in Kenya. While we take note of the honest concerns by citizens about the gaps in the adherence to the professional ethics for the practice of journalism in Kenya by some media practitioners, we want to remind Kenyans that there are enough self-regulatory mechanisms in the industry and profession to deal with such cases. And I want to emphasize that we have Media Complaints Commission that is domiciled at the Media Council of Kenya, and the law envisaged that we will have disputes between the public and the media, between the government and the media, and therefore established the Complaints Commission, where we are supposed to channel all our complaints and seek legal redress. While for a long time, the issues of malpractices in the profession, interference from owners and advertisers, and restrictions in terms of legal regime relating to the media practice in Kenya have affected professional conduct by journalists, we are happy to note that enough is being done by industry players to create an environment that allows the practice of journalism without fear or favor. In addition, targeted attacks against journalists and media houses have instilled fear among journalists, affecting their work. However, we note that the great number of journalists remain professional and bold in their work, and an improved working environment and conducive legal regime will be ideal for journalists to remain focused on public and matter of interest to the public. The COVID-19 pandemic has made it actually the situation to worsen for journalists in Kenya. While applauding the sacrifices that journalists are making in covering the pandemic, we note that the already bad working condition and safety situation of journalists in Kenya has been made worse by the effects of COVID-19 are seen in mass sackings, non-payment of salaries and wages, and harassment of journalists. Since January 2020, we have recorded a record of 34 incidents documented. 10 involved journalists whose rights were violated while on duty during the COVID-19. We have police harassment, intimidation, assault, and denial of access, both physical and provision of information as required by Article 35 of our Constitution. As while wades through the uncharted waters of COVID-19, the media in Kenya reduced income as most employers implement cost-cutting measures to cushion themselves from the negative economic effects of COVID-19. We note that while some of the measures the industry is taking are necessary given the situation, some media executives are taking advantage of the situation to mishandle journalists and violate their rights. And this we can support by the speed with which some media owners moved to chop the salaries of their journalists even before analyzing the situation. And some of them, even if you ask them how long this situation is going to last, they don't have the answers, but they move with speed to chop the salaries of journalists. And where we sit as the industry players, we believe this was taking advantage of the situation to correct some of the problems that the media owners are going through. We are also aware that as frontline workers, journalists and media practitioners are exposed to the daily risks of infection as they seek and report on events of COVID-19. The industry moved in and released editorial and safety guidelines to reinforce the in-house policies that the media houses were implementing. We note that while the sector's concerns and makes interventions on reported violations and continues to champion the cause for justice for journalists affected by attacks, there's a major challenge, a notable and worrying trend where journalists who have been victims of violation resort to withdraw or abandon the cases. And we've seen the number of out-of-court settlement cases between journalists and the people who have been accused of violating their rights actually on the rise. And this is something that as the industry players will be firm on and will be making follow-ups just to find out the behind the scenes that the violators of these rights and the victims actually enter to, so that they can withdraw these cases. We also have a number of interventions that are already made so that we are able to deal with the situation as and when it comes. Media stakeholders established a committee on 13th of March to coordinate safety responses for journalists during the COVID-19 period. Under the same framework, the Media Council of Kenya, with support from UNESCO, developed and disseminated safety guidelines for journalists and media houses on how to sensitize the stakeholders on the COVID-19 and how to handle the situation. Psychosocial and compassionate support has also been offered, and we thank the Media Council, GIZ, IREX for providing trauma and psychological support through virtual counseling session. We know that we had a number of journalists, especially in the coast region, who were taken to quarantine as a result of their interaction with the Deputy Governor of Kilifi. And these journalists, they were around 14 who needed this trauma counseling. And this actually was offered with the support from GIZ and IREX. Association of Media Women in Kenya has also conducted virtual support for its members since they face additional demand on schedule of women. We know that actually women have been victims of assault, and a number of cases have been reported about women being assaulted during this period. There are also journalism grants, and the Media Council has rolled out the first and second phase of health journalism grants targeting health reporters and media associations so that we are able to respond to the needs and the challenges that journalists are going through. The sector continues to engage the offices of the Inspector General of Police, Independent Police Oversight Authority, and directors of public prosecution in search for answers and an apparent inaction on press freedom violation. As we all know, that as we speak, there is only one active case currently in court that journalists are seeking justice about the violation of their rights. A number of cases are still at the investigation period, period, and some files are still lying with the police. Some are lying with the DPP, and they have not been taken to court. So we'll be making follow-up just to ensure that those cases are actually taken to court and the violators are prosecuted. On the way forward, we also have the way forward, how we are going to respond to the challenges. And number one, the sector requests the government and development personnel to consider stimulus package for the media houses in bid to secure jobs for employers. If we do not have journalists, we will not have the media. And therefore, we must find a way how we are going to caution journalists so that they are protected and we have these jobs after COVID-19, because the media plays a very critical role that if ignored, we will not have the industry, because the industry is run by the journalists. We request that the government institutions owing media houses to urgently clear the pending bills. We know that government advertising agency owes the media houses some colossal amount of money, which we believe that if this money is released, then the media owners will be able to pay some of the bills, and some of the bills that are supposed to be paid are journalist salaries. So we hope that in the stimulus package that the government is coming up to rescue other industries, media will also be considered. And we are not begging, because this is work that has already been done. It's upon the government to pay what it owes the media houses. We urge media houses also to prioritize safety and welfare of their employees, so that these employees are able to do their jobs. Like I said earlier, if we do not have journalists, there will be no industry. Newsrooms are also urged to strengthen their fact-checking desks in bid to strengthen verification efforts towards fighting misinformation and disinformation. We know that this era of COVID-19, there's a lot of misinformation flying around, and therefore we hope and urge the media houses to ensure that they have these desks so they're able to check and give accurate and objective information to the public. We also urge the Inspector General of Police to issue a public directive to officers, provide security to journalists and media houses staff while in the course of duty, and desist from harassing and intimidating them. We urge media executives to implement current cost-cutting measures humanely and respect the rights of employees even as they struggle to achieve media sustainability. On this point, we know there have been discussions between Federation of Kenya Employers, Central Organization of Trade Unions, and the Ministry of Labor, where a memorandum of understanding was signed between these three organizations to protect jobs and find a way how journalists will be protected throughout this period. And we hope that media owners, through their association, Federation of Kenya Employers, will implement that MOU to ensure that we still have the industry thereafter. The industry players must continue to collectively and individually look for opportunities to include media reforms and capacity building for journalists amid the challenges. The latter notwithstanding, the media should remain steadfast in demanding for accountability while reporting on the pandemic. Journalism is more critical now than ever before. We call upon all stakeholders to join hands in evolving policy and legal reforms to protect independent journalism in the country. There is a need to strengthen the media self-regulation mechanism to ensure professional journalism to flourish. As I conclude, we are in an unprecedented situation that calls for joint efforts to develop a recovery strategy for the media industry. We know other industries are discussing these strategies, and the media industry cannot be left behind as other industries are looking at the ways how they are going to reposition themselves back things to normalcy. I believe this is the way to go, and this statement has been developed and signed by different organizations which I'll read. We have the Media Council of Kenya, the Kenya Union of Journalists, Kenya Editors Guild, Association of Media Women in Kenya, Association of Freelance Journalists, IREX, and Digital Broadcasters Association. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
And KCA, sorry, and Kenya
yes, we also had,
Association.
Okay, thank you.
Asante sana, SG, we appreciate a lot. Thanks, and the statement will be sent to you colleagues via your online letter and to the media, please. So before we go to just start the next session, Marceline Yambala, could you just wave a hand to your people?
Hello. Yeah, thank you very much, Victor. Amwik, as Association of Media Women in Kenya, we are happy to join our colleagues, all of you, in marking the World Press Week. For us, there's a reason why media is called the fourth estate, and there's a reason why the pen is. And I feel that this resonates very well with our theme for this year, that journalism without fear or favor. Just to make a few remarks, I apologize for not having been there earlier. There was a technical issue, but I'm glad to catch on, and I resonate with what Eric and the statement that we have been developing. The gatekeeping role of media is tested at this time, especially with the COVID. The COVID story, although framed as a health story, we have been able to see many emerging sub-themes, including financial accountability. There is a lot of gender-based violence. There is a technology angle to the story. There is a governance. There is an economic angle to the story. And it is
Marceline, you're muted, eh?
okay. Are you able to hear me now?
It's okay now.
Sure.
Go ahead. It's okay.
Yes, okay. Yes, I was just saying that as Association of Media Women in Kenya, we are glad to join our colleagues in marking the World Press Freedom Day. And we felt that the journalism, there's a reason why journalists are called the fourth estate. And there's a reason why the pen is mightier than the sword. And this resonates very well with the theme for this year, and that is journalism without fear or favor. And I just want to recognize and applaud the journalists who are in the front line, and even everybody else who them support. I said that recently we held a social session with our members and noted that journalists were worried about their health as they cover the story, and also the health of their families when they go back. And therefore, there will be need for us to continue with the psychosocial support for journalists as they cover this story. COVID-19 is challenging to everybody economically, and the framing of COVID-19, though is framed as a health story, we have seen the emergence of sub-themes around it, including financial accountability, corruption, governance, and we have also witnessed a lot of gender-based violence. And therefore, covering all this will require a collaborative approach, and a lot of solution journalism is required, because I know for each and every person who is currently working, the number of dependents has maybe doubled. These personal people, and as well as many funds that are requiring us to contribute from them. Meanwhile, at the same time, we also have the complex emergency situation in the country. That is, we have the floods, have the locusts, we have the mudslides, and therefore we find ourselves as a nation in a very tight situation, and all these media with their role as the fourth estate, holding accountable parliament, judiciary, and all other estates, will need to play a crucial role that I think marking this day more energy that we should practice this without fear or favor. We have also noted that in all this, there remains disproportionate targeted online violence against women as well as women and women journalists. I think we have noticed that from time to time, you find a woman trending and for negative reasons, apart from the gender-based violence that is being experienced on the ground. And therefore, I also reiterate what we have said in the statement, that it would be a good time for government, because we saw that there were pending bills that were released. So we feel that every month, some of the pending bills, the bills that are owed the media every month, some millions should be released to the media houses so that we can help with keeping the jobs and also ensuring that the media houses are able to give the quality that are required. Otherwise, I am happy to be here, and I applaud all of us. Let's keep working hard. And I reiterate the need for a collaborative approach so that with solutions, that we are able to cross to the other side much stronger. Thank you very much, and thank you all the partners, all of us for this engagement, participate in this engagement. Thank you, Victor.
Asante sana, Marceline. We appreciate. Now, colleagues who are on the program, the next reflection is Tim Wanyonyi, Francis Openda, Sheila Masinde, Eric Odur, and Dina Ondari. I request that the panelists, if possible, they go online. We want to see their faces, and request most of you to sign off your cameras so that then the panelists, if possible, so I'll request Tim Wanyonyi, Francis Openda, Sheila Masinde, Eric Odur, and Dina Ondari, who are the panelists in this next session.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Openda here.
Aribusana Francis from Editors Guild. Sheila. Sheila TI. Sheila is there, I can see her. Dina Ondari.
Nico, good morning.
Morning. Eric Odur. Eric. Tim Wanyonyi.
President Victor, good morning.
Morning, sir. How are you?
I'm very well, very well.
So our panel is set. Colleagues, as we mentioned, a few of you, if you have some questions, put on the chat. On your right hand, there's the chat. Immediately, our panelists give their opening remarks. That's a 3-minute opener. We'll go the panelists first, then we'll come back. We check if any of you has raised an issue, a question or something, or a raised hand, then that's how we'll do it. Unlike a physical meeting, it might not be fair to some of you, so I apologize in advance. So I think as the panel reads, I can see Tim, I can see Sheila, I can see Dina. Eric, you are sitting perpendicular. You need to be.
Yes.
you are sitting like you are falling down.
No, I'm okay.
Your camera is giving, and in fact, we are on live on KBC. We had to switch it off because you are looking upside down.
What do you mean, Biwaya?
On a serious note.
Is that okay?
That's okay. That's very fine now, SG.
Okay.
So colleagues, we will start with the team. Wanyonyi, who is, as I mentioned, is a chairperson of the Regulatory Affairs at the Media Council of Kenya. Is also a member of the Editors Guild and a veteran journalist for that matter. an overview of where you sit from a policy level. What do you think, looking at the theme of the event, that's journalism without fear or favor, looking at COVID and the general media performance, how do we reclaim our credibility as media and occupy our space? Team, please.
Thank you, Victor. Good morning, colleagues.
Good morning.
I'm happy to join these celebrations to mark this important day in our calendar. I think our media has done well in extremely difficult circumstances, especially now with COVID. We have seen the media hold public officers to account, especially in the use of public money as well as donor money in the fight against this pandemic. In a situation where there's been an explosion of fake news, we have seen the media give very useful information to the public to use to protect themselves against this pandemic. And we have also seen the media focus on rights abuses, especially by the police when they are implementing this, the curfew orders. So on those scores, I think we've done well, but there are concerns. The point has been made that for us to operate in a free environment, in a conducive environment, we need our media institutions to be strong. And when those institutions are strong, they defend and protect the space that we have been guaranteed even by the Constitution. Now, from a regulatory perspective as Media Council, we are one of those institutions. And our mandate really is to protect the media from government and public overreach and vice versa. We have seen a lot of overreach in this period, and that mandate is executed by the Complaints Commission, as SG mentioned earlier in his presentation. And yet, as we mark this important day today, we do not have a functional Complaints Commission. The mandate of the last one expired sometime last year, and there is still a vacuum there. And we have seen situations where public officials are taking advantage of this vacuum to harass the media. We have seen situations where state officials are summoning journalists over stories, especially relating to COVID. We have seen media houses being forced to make apologies over coverage of the pandemic. Ordinarily, these cases will go to the Media Council and therefore the Complaints Commission. But because it's not in place, there's this vacuum, we are having these issues. I think at a policy level, as a Media Council, we are putting in place some guidelines on handling complaints as a stopgap measure. But going forward, the permanent solution to this is having a complaints commission in place that is functional. So as we mark this day, I will urge you as stakeholders that we push for the establishment of a complaints commission that is functional. The CEO has spoken about other interventions that the council has made to help the media and journalists to operate. I will not end there by all and
team online. Open up, please.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And we can supposed to be looked journalist and during the coverage of COVID-19 pandemic in Kenya. Maybe starting off the journalists. I think while looking at safety of journalists, I will consider 3 areas which right now are facing journalists. The first is the physical threat. And the physical threat comes from the police, as the Secretary General said earlier. It also comes from state functionaries who do not want some information, especially at this time in terms of purchases they're making or financial decisions they're making to come out. So that will be the physical threat. Then there's the financial threat. The financial threat is the threat that affects the journalists directly. And this comes in 2 ways. Number one, the corporation or the organization they work for is affected. So it's either laying off people or reducing salaries or sending people home. So that is the financial threat at the corporate level. Then there's a financial threat now at the individual level, whereby now this journalist who you expect to do so much has already suffered some reduction in their monthly income. Then thirdly is what I would call the health threat, which is directly related to the pandemic. You'll see journalists in the front line going to areas which really exposes them to COVID-19. Why? Because they want to tell the story and bring out the true picture of what is happening. You've seen journalists spending time at Mbagathi and going into the areas where people are quarantined to bring out the story. But in the process, they're also exposing themselves to getting the disease, because in some cases, you see that journalists are not properly kitted to cover those particular functions. So that, to me, is a health threat. But also the other health stress is more psychological. Look at the issue of the Mombasa journalists who had to be quarantined for some time because they came into contact with the deputy governor. So with time, there's a stigma, and at a personal level also, you end up being stressed. So journalists are also going through stress and trauma at this particular time. So those are the threats that I can highlight for now. Maybe when we come back, we can talk about access to information and accountability. Thanks, Victor.
Thanks, Bwana Upenda. Wamesema ujitengeneze picha kidogo, uangalie pande hii ndio tukuone vizuri. Songesha okay, sawa sawa. Thanks, France. I'll go to Sheila. Sheila Masinde from TI Kenya office, largely on the issues of accountability, access to information, and your general view from where you sit. Is she muted?
Victor, thank you for this opportunity to just highlight some of the reflections we have in regards to accountability during this COVID-19 pandemic. As I stated in the opening, this World Press Freedom Day is particularly and actually more important than ever because we believe that free media is the most important catalyst to control the illicit designs of those who may be out to profiteer or to convert the COVID-19 pandemic into a corruption feast. So as I stated, the novel coronavirus has brought about with it an unprecedented effect on all sectors, including the practice of professional journalism. And we really just once again want to commend journalists for being able to continue to stand in the front line, to continue to exercise their watchdog role, even while exposing themselves to the risk of infection. Now, for us as TI, and also speaking on behalf of many other civil society organizations, because we've made a couple of joint statements, petitions, requests for information, and also memoranda to both the Senate and the National Assembly, calling on the government to take keenness and ensure that particularly accountability and transparency measures are put in place during this time as we respond to the crisis. Particularly, we have raised concerns on access to information, on financial information. Even as we speak now, we're trying to prepare a petition on the issues around the importance of presenting detailed expenditure information following what happened last week. We've also made calls on transparency in procurement. We're concerned about some aspects of public procurement. We've talked about the protection of whistleblowers. And here, when you talk about whistleblowers, it's not just public-spirited individuals or civil society organizations, but the media have also been key whistleblowers in this country. In fact, most of the scandals that have littered this country have been brought to the limelight courtesy of journalists and other media practitioners. So we consider journalists as key whistleblowers as well, and we want to ensure that they continue, that they are protected even in the current situation. We've also raised concerns about the use of brute force by the police, among others. Particularly, I want to just focus on the issue around access to information, because I believe this is particularly key in enabling journalists to give us information objectively and even in a timely manner. You know that currently we have access to information provided for under Article 35, Section 1 of the Constitution, which guarantees all Kenyan citizens the right to access any information held by the state or information held by any other person, which is required for the exercise or protection of any right of fundamental freedom. And we read this together with the Access to Information Act, which was passed in 2016, and the County Government Act of 2012. And a number of people here, I've seen a number of names in the call, have been together with civil society since 2000, when we started calls for a freedom of information law. So they know the journey that we had walked. And particularly in time to engage journalists and the media in agitating for a freedom of information law, it was under the cognizance that journalists will need this information to be able to share with the public and give the public a true picture of what is happening. So currently, one of the things that we are really pressing for is access to information. So across the petitions and the memoranda that we have made to Parliament is really that request that we must have certain information to enable also Kenyans to make certain decisions and also to enable them to cooperate with some of the measures that have been put in place. One of the things we are particularly calling for, and we really hope that the media can join us in making this call and ensuring that it actually happens, and maybe just before that, is to say that currently we are challenged because we don't have the regulations to fully effect the access to information law. It is one of the items that the Commission on Administrative Justice, the Ombudsman, was working on up to now. And it's unfortunate that this situation finds us without the regulations. But even in the absence of regulations, because we have the provision in the Constitution and we have the access to information law, we believe that we should still be able to get information as and when required. And we want also the government to be able to proactively publish this information. So one of the things we are asking for is that information that is related to the response to this pandemic should be provided within 48 hours when citizens, when media, and other public-spirited individuals ask for certain information in regarding the information regarding the pandemic, and this is actually provided for under Section 9 of the Access to Information Act. So we ask the media to help us make some of these calls that we've been making. So access to information is particularly important. And one of the things we're also asking is that the government to proactively publish this information. We've asked that we have a public information portal. It's not just for us, it would also assist the journalists to be able to cover and provide objective information, particularly on the finances. And from last week, you can see the concerns that Kenyans have. And we want detailed information. And I think if government is able to actually have a portal where we go and we are able to get detailed expenditure information on the budget, how have resources been allocated, how have resources been utilized, then Kenyans will be at peace that their resources are being utilized prudently and for the purposes that have been set aside for. So we ask the media to help us make this call. We've also made several calls on issues around public procurement. I really won't go so much into that, but one of the things in regard to transparency in public procurement is that we've asked the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority to give us, to publish a market price index of all equipment and other medical supplies so they can be able to guide the procurement of essential items, because we fear during this time where we've also experienced stockouts of critical equipment and supplies, which will enable us to respond to the crisis accordingly. We've had stockouts, and as a result of these stockouts, we've seen that some of these items are being procured at really inflated prices. And even when you looked at the expenditure report, issued last week, and we look forward to further details so that we can actually be able to see when you talk about when you say that you have spent 4 million in snacks or 9 million in printing forms, what are the details? What is the story behind that particular expenditure information, so that we can be able also to assess as Kenyans and say whether these monies have been used to proper use or there's a problem in terms of accountability. So we'd like the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority to be able to issue a market price index of items that are required during this time. We also want to get information on the beneficial owners of some of these companies that are being given contracts to provide goods and supplies during this time, because we also know that there's a big risk that people who are connected could be the ones getting some of these contracts. But we want to be sure that that's not happening. So we're also asking that we get information of the beneficial owners of these companies. We also want that, we also need that the expenditure is well audited, and we've made calls that the Office of the Auditor General should ensure that in due time. We understand that this is an emergency situation, but in due course, we expect that the Office of the Auditor General will be able to audit that information, and that information will be shared to the public and to the media as well, so that they can be able to inform the public. But we've also asked Parliament to ensure that all expenditure incurred during this time is subjected to regular internal audits, and they institute other necessary remedial measures to safeguard against any mismanagement or loss of public money from the onset. And related to this, when you talk about auditing, there's also a concern that up to now, we have not concluded the selection and appointment of the Auditor General, and this creates a gap, particularly during this emergency situation. And we need someone in that office, to ensure that the necessary oversight is applied. So I think with that, I want to stop there. Those are some of the key accountability issues we have raised, and we really want to continue working with journalists. As I mentioned earlier, we're working on capacity building and mentoring journalists so that we can be able to ensure that we get objective reports and free flow of information, particularly at this time. And also one of the calls that we are making, especially given some of the concerns that have been raised by some of the panelists, that this is the time that we want to control corruption, but let us not control or harass the media, because once we do that, then we'll not be able to get information that provides a true picture of the situation on the ground. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheila. Remain online, because a few questions I've already seen. You're still on the panel. Eric Odur, I'm sure as a trade unionist, you have been involved in a number of this. What is your view? I'm aware KUJ, in addition to the other work we are doing of documentation, you're already in court. We have been involved in discussion with a number of media houses on the issue of and how they are handling the issue of either mass sacking or reduction, the issue of salary and related. So kindly record SG. Eric Odur. Dina Nari, you are available?
Yes, I am.
Kindly go ahead as we try to track Eric Odur. Dina Nari is the manager for accreditation and compliance at the Media Council of Kenya. She also manages the safety and protection program at the council. So Dina, from what you have been involved in, including the letters, the DPP, IT, on your database, gender issues, what has been what's your view on reflections on the topic at hand?
Thank you so much, Victor, for this opportunity. First of all, I would like to commend really journalists who are frontline workers during this COVID-19 situation, because we know that they are contending with a lot of challenges. And so we appreciate the sacrifices that they are making. From the Media Council of Kenya, from our safety and protection program perspective, is that COVID-19 has really made journalism very difficult, not only in Kenya, but also elsewhere in the world. And a part of what we do is to receive reports, document, and roll out interventions. So I would like to note that we have noted that in Kenya, the COVID situation has made the conditions even more difficult. And I'm not just saying this. This is something that is supported by data. Cases of journalists being attacked in the field or feeling threatened in one way or another have become a common. They have become more common this time. And from the period between February and May, or today as we speak, we have recorded a number of cases. To be specific, we have had more than 15 cases, and the ones that are related to COVID-19 are 10. These are journalists who have been in confrontation with security agents who are implementing government guidelines on movement, the curfew. And though we have gone ahead and facilitated the movement of journalists around the country by issuing accreditation, the conventional accreditation card that we give, we even went ahead to issue the special media passes for critical editorial staff. But it is disappointing and indeed disturbing to see that journalists continue to encounter challenges in terms of accessing the places of work, in terms of accessing information that they need. And we have several times, on several occasions, called upon and had conversations with the security agents, various arms of government, to ensure that they facilitate journalists' movement and access to various places of work and to give them information. And to be specific, as part of our interventions, we have twice before written to the Police Inspector General to ask for answers on cases that have been reported to police, because one of the challenges that we are facing in trying to ensure that journalists get justice when they are attacked or when their rights are being violated is that these cases are reported. Either there is no follow-up or they are dropped along the way. And so we have written twice to the IG, once to the IG and twice, sorry about that, I'll take it again. We have written to the IG once and the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, just to get feedback on what's happening on those cases, because there was a sense of fatigue around the issue of justice for journalists. And the cases that, out of 19 cases that were reported since last year, We have only one case that is pending before court, which is almost being concluded. But most of the cases have either been abandoned or withdrawn, or journalists feel at some point there is no need to proceed and withdraw the cases. And this is giving us a big challenge because while the journalists come to us to ask that we, and indeed some of the cases we take on our own motion to assist them to access justice, at some point they make a decision that they don't want to proceed with these cases. And this now puts the process of pursuing justice in jeopardy because the manner in which these cases are withdrawn is not coordinated. And we appreciate indeed that as journalists may feel that they need to reconcile with the people that are targeted. But we would like to insist that the manner in which it happens and it's not coordinated. So it's a bit demoralizing even for the actors who want to facilitate justice for journalists. On the issue of access to information, I mentioned about the issue of accreditation card, which journalists are supposed to carry as they perform their duties at the workplace, and the special media passes. We also have an access to information handbook that we have published with the Commission for Administrative Justice. This is a very critical reference material that is important for journalists, that we can use for training, sensitization for both journalists and indeed members of the public and even public officers, because most of the cases that we have, especially from counties, are as a result of failure by county governments and public officials and even members of the public to grant access to journalists who need critical information for their stories. And even members of the public have been brought into this issue of attacking journalists because they are most of the time they don't act on their own, but we find that sometimes there are political forces behind the gangs that we see attacking journalists. So what we do at the Media Council is also to ensure that we sensitize members of the public, journalists and public officers to ensure that while the journalists are aware and conscious of their rights, then they are also able to respect the rights of their sources and vice versa. At the council, we have a hotline which through which journalists can report cases of attacks, and an email address. And these communication channels have really helped us to get reports from the field, and we are able to verify those reports before we respond. And to be specific to the COVID-19 period, we have implemented several interventions to help journalists do their work and to reduce threats on their part. And this include publication of guidelines that in consultation, of course, with the industry players to help journalists utilize practical information to help them to prevent them from getting infected or exposing themselves too much. But there is an area of concern. I know Openda spoke about the 3 threats that journalists are exposed to right now. And I would want to add that on the issue of psychological health, there is that issue of stigma. There is a journalist who called me yesterday. We were having a conversation, and it's one of the frontline reporters that we've been having during this COVID-19 situation. And he told me that he has been dealing with a situation which is, and I suspect that he could be one of the participants, but I'll leave that to him to decide whether to speak about it or not. Saying that he has had to withdraw from the workplace and to take a break, and of course in consultation with his media house, because he he feels stigmatized within the society, because he was telling me that even neighbors are telling their children not to interact with his, because they have been seeing him on TV a lot, and they think that he could be infected at some point. So there are many challenges that journalists are dealing with right now, and we are always at hand to intervene. Speaking of psychological health, the council has previously engaged journalists from Kilifi County and provided them with psychosocial support. We engaged experts who were able to speak to them and offered them counseling in several sessions. And this is work that is continuing, it's not one-off. And I think it's a general understanding that this COVID situation is going to be with us for a while. And so it's a continuous process, and it's on a daily basis, we keep on reviewing our strategies and looking at the gaps and looking at what it is that we can do to help and make the work of journalists easy. Thank you, Victor.
Eric Odwar is back.
Yes, I'm around. I'm on.
Yeah, Victor.
Yeah, we can. Oh, Victor's lost. Okay, yes, thank you so much. I think the host sometimes has been very unfair to me. He keeps the host keeps muting my mic. But anyway, I think you can.
We're looking for when you were in the bunker.
No, I was here until I could hear you. But now that my mic was muted, you could hear me. But now you can hear me.
Okay, go ahead. Please, Steve.
Yes. I'll pick from the threats that our senior Francis Openda talked about. And as a trade unionist, there is this threat that Openda talked about, which is financial threat. And actually it's becoming real. If we look at some of the complaints and the discussions that are going in different forums, as far as the welfare of journalists is concerned. And this is something that we must now take very seriously. And I said earlier that we will not have an industry if we do not have workers. And I think this matter must now be taken seriously by the people who are managing the industry. Right now, I'm seeing from all over the country, especially correspondents have not been paid for the past 1 month or so. If you have not paid somebody and you expect this person to continue delivering in the work and is not influenced, then we would be lying to ourselves that we'll be talking about journalism without fear or favor. If these people are still thinking about how they're going to pay their bills, at the same time, they're also expecting them to deliver work that is fearless and has got no favor to any player involved, then we would be addressing a very wrong symptom. I have been involved in different negotiations with different media managers, and I would say that there are some that actually are very concerned about the situation and doing much as they can to rescue the situation and ensure that the little that is available is actually sustainable and shared among the journalists who are working for those media houses. And I appreciate that there's been that engagement. However, there are some that are still stubborn. As you all know, that the number, at least there are some 2 active cases in court that are protesting the pay cuts that were announced by different media houses. I think sometimes it's good also to reflect and ask yourself, why these 2 media houses have been in court? They are in court because they have refused to engage. They have closed the doors for negotiations. They have made unilateral decisions without considering that we have people here who also need to be listened to and their concerns addressed. And we are asking some very simple questions here. And the key among the questions that we are asking these media owners is, we know that nobody has the answers of when the industry will recover. We know nobody has the answers if you ask that how long are we going to have this COVID-19 with us here? Nobody has the answers, and we recognize that. So we are asking these media owners, these media managers, that the only thing that we require right now is periodic review of the situation. And there are some media houses that actually were frank with us and asked for time. I'll tell you, for example, the Director General of BBC himself actually called for a meeting with the union leaders and asked his managers to engage media leaders, the union leaders. And he asked that, please just give me 4 months so that by September we convene again and review the situation. So that if the situation improves, then we can start discussions on financial matters. You know, those kind of the engagement we are talking about. Myself, I had an engagement with the CEO of the media, of Nation Media Group himself, Stephen Kitagama, and we said that this is not a matter of feeling important. Even him, he said that it's not a matter of someone feeling important that must be engaged, but because you are dealing with human beings whose interest must also be taken into consideration. And we agreed that after every 2 months, we'll sit down and do a review of the situation. If the situation improves, then we see how the adjustments can be made so people go back to their salaries. If you do the market survey, you will find that one employee who earns salary actually supports up to 40 people. So if you are going to reduce salary of an individual, it means that you are also affecting the livelihood of 40 people. Because you have children, you have siblings, you have parents, you have everybody around you who is also relying on you, including a butcher man, who is also relying on you to go and buy meat there. So if you are reducing my salary, it means that you are also reducing the income of the supermarket where I go shop. So if I was doing a shopping of 2,000, it means that I'll now be doing a shopping of 500 shillings. So that means that you're also affecting the livelihood and the continuity of this supermarket where these employees are also working. And you will also find that the ripple effect affects everybody in the whole chain. And these are the conversations that we are talking about. But let us have these conversations and look at how we can cushion the workers in the media industry so that they're able to do journalism without fear or favor. Otherwise, we might not have the industry, we will be just making noise, but things are bad. As I conclude, I would say that we need to find how we position our people in the industry so that we deal with the challenges of quality. You will not expect quality journalism if the person who is supposed to be delivering a story did not have food last night, or is not aware, or is anxious if this person will be eating the next meal during lunchtime, or will be having his next meal the following day. So these are the very difficult situations that we must be looking into. I know the problem we've had in the industry is that we've never taken seriously the issue of human resource. And I know that most newsrooms are actually bleeding. Right now, the people who have been in newsroom will tell you that newsrooms have retrenched. They have retrenched to the extent that now probably they will be allowed now to start retrenching the computers and the machines they have in the newsrooms. They will go there because right now newsrooms are understaffed. So that if you talk about again further retrenchment, you are just affecting the industry because the quality goes down. Because if one person used to, for example, where I sit as a sub editor, if one person used to sub, let's say, 5 pages or 6 pages a day, then you are now telling this person now to start subbing 10 or 15 pages a day. Definitely quality will go down because what will now remain on the table is that let me finish my work. Let me finish my 10 pages so that these pages actually are sent to press. Whether I'm looking into the quality or not, it doesn't matter. What I'm looking at finishing my work. These are very difficult questions that we must start addressing. And I believe that probably in post-COVID-19, because I said we might not know how it's going, when it's going to end, this is the discussion that the industry must start talking about so that we're able to address the welfare of journalists who are working and how this will actually have an impact on quality journalism. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for listening.
Gee, thanks. I think we want, given the time, I know the next panel, some of them are about to leave. I want to ask James Ratemo, you had raised a question. If you are online, James Ratemo, could you shoot your question and direct it to any of the particular panelists quickly in short? Ratemo? James? Okay, Gladys Kinyu? Gladys?
Yes, can I go on, Mr. Bwire?
James, please shoot your question urgently and direct it to any of the panelists.
Yes, I'm directing especially to the SG, and anybody can, of course, chip in. We are seeing many journalists being laid off, and sometimes it's unavoidable. We can keep on complaining, but my key question is, are there private arrangements on how these journalists can take care of themselves even without a paycheck? We have many programs out here. People have personal medical cover, personal social security plans, retirement plan. Are there solid programs on how to safeguard these journalists? That is my key question. Thank you.
Asante James. Gladys Kinyu, are you online?
Yes, I'm
Gladys,
here, Eric.
Kindly shoot your question urgently.
My question was, if the mainstream media houses are struggling, what about the community radio stations? And what measures is the MCK doing at least to help the community radio station and community from those radio?
Thank you. Kwamboka Wayaro, are you online? Madam Kwamboka Wayaro, are you online? Kyoko Kibandi? Kyoko, are you online? Yes, I am. These are the people who had raised questions. Like Jasper Tieno, are you online? Hello? Jasper? Salmina, your question? Okay, Elvis Ondiek, go ahead. Elvis Ondiek. Elvis Ondiek, go ahead.
Thank you very much. So, my question is regarding the apology we saw recently from the TV. Running an apology the other day to Fuli and Tanzania. Did that thing ever pass through Media Council of Kenya for deliberations before that happened? It was just a business decision. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a team. I know you'll handle that. Topista na Busoba. Topista? Topista? Ann Wangari? Ann Wangari?
Topista online.
Okay, please go ahead with your question.
Thank you for this meeting. What I've seen is that most media houses have opted to have the journalists probably not work, and therefore losing a very, a critical issue in terms of covering COVID. And there's a tendency to be more to protect themselves much more, are not ready to spend, to facilitate journalists to cover the various aspects of the COVID. I don't know what Media Council, I did raise an issue in terms of monitoring to see whether media houses are doing what we should do in terms of, covering of the different aspects of this pandemic. Thank you.
Asante. Lydia Wangoma, I see you tweeting from Budalangi. Are you surviving the floods? Lydia Wangoma? Lydia. Dixon Odhiambo from Jahero. Uko. Dixon. Winnie Meseda from Mombasa.
Yes, I'm here.
Kindly go ahead. Nasikia you survived dengue fever. Sasa mnang'ang'ana na COVID, sawa?
Good morning, guys. How are you?
Very fine. Go ahead.
Mine goes directly to the SG. How is the media trying to cope up with the new economic trends? We see the economy has changed. It's no longer the usual business of writing newspapers and radio. Yes, we see guys are being laid off. The pay cuts are there. How is the media going to sustain itself in the near future? That is a threat.
Victor, can we take this and proceed?
Hello, we have lost Niseda.
No, I'm on.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm asking on how you guys can.
About what we have currently. I live in Rongo, and I can imagine the layers and layers of personal handling that a newspaper would get from Nairobi, from the print press, all the way up to Rongo. By the time I'm buying it from the newspaper guy, really I cannot be sure in this period of COVID how safe that newspaper is. And sadly, we cannot sanitize a newspaper. So as a result of that, I think all of us have seen this proliferation of online newspapers, and then there is a debate about copyright and what have you, and so on and so forth. I've tried to analyze, shallowly though, the various copyright laws that we have, and I think that this COVID-19 period really has given the newspapers an opportunity to look at the whole thing of print handling and distribution, because it appears like we're not going to go back to the normal. So my question is, the first part was an observation. My question is, in what ways are we going to still be relevant and be observant of the laws that are in place regarding copyright, and at the same time be safe by avoiding the print newspapers as we have them today, and at the same time enjoy our rights of reading newspapers through sharing the online versions of the newspapers? Thank you.
Asante sana, Ofenda or team, and we will. Calvin Nyangweso, last question, please. Go ahead, Calvin.
Yes, Victor. Mine will be just direct to the CEO, David Omoyo. The other time we spoke about the accreditation of journalists, and we saw in the other side from Mombasa, most of the journalists were turned away during the accreditation process due to the lack of maybe documentation and stuff. But we agreed that journalists on the field should be accredited, and we discussed about issuing different accreditation to different field roles that are being played at the station. So where have we reached on it, and what measures are you putting in place needed to be accredited as such, as we know that they are practicing on the field? Another point is support for the direct community media station. What is the criteria? Thank you.
Asante, Kevin. Now, quickly, I see Silas Karagu, you are saying that discussion ongoing at the state broadcaster, that's KBC, that they don't need some workers during this COVID crisis. It is going to be bad. Eric, maybe you can take care of that. The other question I think have gone directly to other guys. So, colleagues, as you respond to the panelists, starting with the team, then Francis, then Sheila, Eric, and Dina in that order, take 2 minutes respond to any specific as you make your closing remarks. We are behind time. I know we are losing the panelists for the second session. So, colleagues. Tim?
Hello, Victor. I didn't get the question that was directed to me. Sorry.
What the Media Council is doing, the issue of a safety fund. How far are stakeholders going to secure some support for media houses, both during COVID and post? Remember the things you raised when you are speaking about the interventions you are trying to do at a policy level. How do we push on the media?
Oh, okay, thank you. I think the CEO spoke about that on the interventions. I think there are 3 levels, 2 or 3 levels that I'm aware of. One is the donor supported, which enables journalists to travel around the country and report on COVID. Then I think there is a government fund that is being worked on that supports community radio stations. So I can say that at a policy level, but on the nitty-gritty and the details, I think only the CEO can speak on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim.
Okay.
So, Francis.
Yeah, I'll address 2 issues, Victor, here. The first one, I'll address the issue raised by Dr. John Oloch about newspaper safety and distribution. As he rightly puts it, times have changed and newspaper organizations have to change with the times. I'm sure if they had adopted digital newspaper platforms way back, they could not be incurring some of the costs right now like newsprint. So to remain relevant, they must seriously explore digital platforms, e-newspapers, so that Daktari there in Rongo can get his newspaper right where he's seated right now without going to look. On paper and seal it, and subscription, so that it comes, your paper comes directly to Rongo University through subscription without passing through any vendor, but that will definitely add the costs. Then there's also the issue of, you talked about copyright. But Daktari, if you receive your digital paper, your e-paper, which you subscribe for and pay for, then you circulate it for you're infringing on intellectual property, and thirdly, you're breaking the rule on copyright. So please don't circulate. When you receive yours, just read it with your immediate family members. There's the issue that was raised by the lady from Mombasa about media organizations reinventing themselves. And I can for certain tell you that the media did not start, these problems did not start because of COVID. We were already experiencing these challenges, mainly because of disruption in technology. It's only that COVID hastened the process. But layoffs have been there for the past 2-3 years. Advertising revenue has reduced for the past 2-3 years. So what do we need to do to reinvent ourselves? Because people keep on blaming social media, saying that it has taken away the audience. But the audience have a choice, just like a traveler. If you want to travel to Kisumu, you have a choice of using Mbukinya, you have a choice of flying, you have a choice of using the train. So we must reinvent ourselves to try and fit into what the audience wants. So whether you're a community radio station, whether you're a newspaper, whether you are a TV station, repackage yourself and be target-oriented, audience-oriented, so that you appeal to that audience. And the newspapers also. Newspapers, you will not tell me about an accident that occurred in the morning and you want me to read the story the next day, you must give us day 2 journalism and more interpretative articles so that I can spend that 60 shillings to buy your newspaper. I don't want what happened in the morning to be what I see in my TV screens at night and what I read the next day. Give us day 2 journalism or take the story beyond what happened. Thank you, Victor. Victor, are you there?
Francis.
Yes.
Would you mind maybe, Francis, Patrick Gadara had raised a question here.
Yeah, remind me.
And he was talking about the cuts. If people are talking about media, public support for private media, is it possible? What will be the mechanisms? Patrick Gadara is raising a question. We are all talking about we must seek support for media. Now, how does it look like when we seek public funds to support private media? Are there any case studies? How would this work?
I think for now, using public funds to support private media would be a bit tricky because private media already has vested interests, both commercial and political. So, and take a Kenyan scenario whereby these media houses are owned by individuals who have different agendas that they want to drive. How would you use my tax to fund that private media house to drive that agenda? The failure for me has been lack of a strong public broadcaster, not because the people working there don't know what they're expected to do, but because of the regulatory framework and the hurdles that have been put on their way. KBC by now would be one of the best public broadcasters, funded by me and you, and proudly knowing that it has no inclination to any individual or political party. It could be operating along the same lines as BBC, it could be operating along the same lines as Voice of America, the Shuela, which are all funded by the public, by the taxpayers in those respective countries. What the private media needs to do going forward, I think it's a lesson. They should set up a fund whereby, a thinking fund, whereby they have resources which they channel to that fund, and during difficult times, they can draw from that basket and sustain themselves.
Thank you.
This is Patrick Gadara.
Yes, Patrick.
Yes, Patrick.
When you talk about private media providing the news, I mean, the news is a public good. You know, we even protect it in our constitution. So therefore, isn't there an argument that the public should pay for this news? And if they actually do, my other question was, what would be the obligations on the media house, so that when it comes to how you cover incidences such as COVID, etc., do you have an obligation to the public and should then be paying for that? Thank you.
Upenda, you want to wrap it up?
I agree with Gadara that the first and foremost role of the media is public service. But I'm trying to reconcile myself with the public funding a private enterprise to keep it afloat. I think the only way here would be to have, like there's an attempt to have even private media have a certain percentage that must be of local content. So we maybe go through this line and see what is mandatory for private media to cover, and the segmentation and the time that should be given for that kind of coverage.
Asante, Francis. I'll go to Sheila. Sheila, after you respond and make your remarks. Sheila Masinde still around? Sheila?
Yes.
As you wrap up, I would want to, somebody raised the issue of access to information on counties. Have we received any specific cases where journalists have been denied information on COVID-related issues so far that you have recorded, and your general overview.
Yeah, thank you. Well, so far it has not been brought to our attention whether any journalists have been denied information, but I would like to request that if you get to a situation where you do not get information even after placing a request, we have the Commission on Administrative Justice, the Ombudsman. Under the Ombudsman, the Information Commissioner, who has been given the mandate to oversee access to information, that office is placed under the Commission on Administrative Justice. So what one simply needs to do is also seek redress through the Commission on Administrative Justice. And in fact, like for us at civil society, one of the things we do whenever we request information is just put a copy as well to the Commission on Administrative Justice and the Information Commissioner, so they know that they're aware that we are seeking certain information. And many times, actually, we have asked, actually, as I said, we have raised more than 10 requests for information. Up to date, we are yet to receive any from the Ministry of Information, from the Pharmacy and Poisons Board, and any other institutions. But what we have done is try to follow up with the commission. And I think that they have been one of the proactive commissions, independent commissions, and so that they can be able to seek their help. As I mentioned, because I want to link this with a question raised by Jasper Otieno in the chat, he raises the concern that journalists are not taking advantage of the Act on Access to Information, and as a result, there are instances where information shared on social media is disseminated in the mainstream media by journalists without verification to confirm whether they are true, whether it's true or fake news. I think for us, as I mentioned, as TI and under the Action for Transparency project, we have been training journalists in investigative reporting and awarded others with grants and mentorship. And one of the designs we have in the current situation is a series of online engagements with journalists. And in that, we will include training on fact-checking and reporting on corruption in this era of the pandemic. And perhaps one of the things we can also do is just capacity building journalists. And how do you put in a request on access to information? So that is something we are willing to work with other stakeholders so that we can be able to increase the capacity for journalists to be able to pursue such information. Before I wind up, there's also a question raised on by Lydia Wangomba on how TI is protecting journalists reporting on corruption. When mentioned individuals and institutions come out to refute the claims, thus discrediting the media. So far, no one has come to us, no journalist has come to us, but we also know that there are many people who will witness or have experiences of corruption out there, and they will not come to report, including journalists. But we encourage them, please come forth with your reports of corruption. And as journalists, in cases where your lives have been threatened because you have exposed corruption through your stories. But as I mentioned, we have a big challenge in Kenya. We do not have a whistleblower protection law in place yet. It's something that we have been pursuing, and it has been in the pipeline for up to now 7 years, since 2013. And it is somewhere, we are told it's somewhere at the ministry, at the state law office, waiting to be processed. But we are doing all we can to ensure that we have that act in place. And unfortunately, this situation finds us without law protection legal framework to ensure that people, whether it's members of the public and journalists particularly, who come forth with stories of corruption, are protected. And what I would say about whistleblower protection is I would ask that anyone who has an issue, they report to us. But one of the things we would do is try to work with other media stakeholders, including the Media Council, to see how such journalists can be protected. We are willing to support any calls that to including, especially journalists, encourage in like, for instance, in access to information. So in this case, the special protection target quite clear that if a journalist faces threats to their lives because of a story, then they are clear about where they can report, which agency will be charged with ensuring their protection, and what are the other redress or remedial measures that can be undertaken to their protection. Thank you.
Asante, Sheila. Eric, as you make your last comment, Beryl Muga has asked some around the EA that person, the main advertiser, for example, how does it relate that a media then has to write about government in general, and yet GA also buys space for government? How does that, in terms of growth? So Beryl had raised that question. Beryl is from Maseno University. So
Okay,
thank
you. Okay, sir. Thank you so much, Victor. Please allow me to answer this question wearing the hat of a political economist. For any economy to perform well and to function well, it means that the government must play a very critical role in terms of driving the economy. Functions of the government looking here at first, the government must ensure that we have got a conducive environment for anybody who is participating in the economic development to thrive. And therefore, media, just like any other sector, requires that environment must be conducive for it to perform well. I wouldn't want to see why would the government, for example, levy very heavy taxes on newsprint when we know that actually the traditional legacy media, as we look at it, is struggling. Why would the government still be levying taxes on some of the very critical factors of production in the media industry? Those are some of the roles that we are asking the government actually to play to ensure that the environment is actually conducive for business in the media to thrive. Secondly, like we've said, that GAA is one of the advertisers. Actually, the money goes through the GAA to the media houses. Until 2013, when GAA was established, we knew very well that the media industry was thriving very well, and the government, again, being the custodian of most of the money that is circulating in the economy, has a role to play. And therefore, any sector does business with the government. If you look at the entire private sector, relying on government with the sector, and looking at the media sector, we are not asking for handouts of the government to leave media houses money. No, we are just saying that the government must make promise for the media. You know, the GAA was actually formed not to do the business of the media, but actually to control the revenue flow into the media. So if we remove those blocks, the media will thrive. If you look at the performance of the media over the past 6 years and years before, you'll see the media was performing very well because the business of the media relies around advertising and actually is the major source of revenue to the media. And so if you close that tap, whether we sell 100 copies, hundreds of thousands of copies of the newspapers, that is not enough to run the media. So we must look at holistically the role of the government in ensuring that the economy is running and every sector is benefiting from the economy. Looking at some of the... Yes?
No, just continue, Rick.
Okay. So then there is a question that was asked by Oluwach. I think this is again Dr. Oluwach. This is something that actually has been falsified, that if you look at the newspaper production chain, maybe you or at most the second person to handle that newspaper. The process, the big part of the process actually is handled by machines, even including the loading these papers into the van that ferry the newspaper to Rongo. So by the time you are in newspaper, you pass out. So more interaction between human beings and the newspapers in all the production and the supply chain. 2, all the papers actually have the e-papers. E-paper so that, and when you need it. Go to the question that was raised by Ratemo, it was raised by Winnie as well. I can combine the two. I am an expert on social protection projects and programs that different countries are actually using. When I say that we need engagement between ourselves and media owners, not because they're important, because there are some this from basic shocks that sometimes some of them, I think nobody predicted will have COVID-19. And what I've seen in other parts of the world, what happens is there is a program, there's a program called Out of Work program. That means that while you are working, you are able to enter into an agreement with the employer so that we also have a fund, the same way we have got pension fund, you can also have an out of work fund, whereby every month you will be sending some money to that fund to help you when you are out of work, because sometimes you can be fired, sometimes you can find yourself, your health not allow you to continue working. That is when you start drawing the money from that fund. So these are the options that we always when they get to work. Only that we do not engage. If we engage enough, we'll be able to come up with all these programs so that we're able to protect our children whenever they are out of work. As I said, and are able to see what will happen probably in the that able to cover and protect this, and especially these, for example, like flower farms. Sometimes they're able, or agricultural sector, there are things that they're able to predict. When they predict that, then they usually come up with a special fund that can help these workers to withdraw some earnings from that fund when we going through such turbulent times. So these solutions there. What we need is we need to open these negotiation doors. We're able to sit and agree on how we are going to implement these things. Not that the solutions are ended.
Victor, can I just say something?
But Francis,
yeah, just for the issue of Gadara, see his question about it. This is direct capital injection to the enterprises, but there are measures that can be taken that can help this organization do like the of tax, the issue of newsprint, newsprint, the issue of VAT on advertising. These are indirect that can be used to support media, but I support direct injections.
Yes,
CEO alluded to in his earlier presentation, the 37 cases are for the and the same was why the ranking for the country has dropped from 96 to 103. From our thing, I think it's because we have had many cases, because this that started in 2019, where we had more than 54 cases the whole year, but now we are barely into June 2020, and we are talking about 37 cases, and then this on analysis. So we attribute this situation to the situation to the high number of cases that we have had locally, and so it's something that should concern everyone, every media station. This country, that we reduce cases because everyone has a role to play. There is also the hotline. It's 0702, the safety hotline. If you are a journalist who is under threat or you want to report a violation, the number is 0702 222 111, and you can also email us through safety@mediacouncil.or.ke. I had typed the figures and the email on the chat, so you can make reference. Someone asked a question about accreditation and special media passes. That was Kevin. I was not able to get the whole session because at some point the connection was interfered with. I don't know if put it across again.
The question was on the issue purely Kevin will deal with it. What happened in Mombasa Malindi was pure technical issue. Guys from Holland managed it to come to Malindi in time. So I think we'll deal with it. It's purely a specific question about accreditation of guys from Tana River
You remember and what happened at that time and the other issue. I think you will respond to everything. No worries.
Okay, there are for me to respond.
Thank you.
Beware, can you give me a minute? There's something I need to talk about ranking, because I've seen so many questions about ranking, because I'm private.
Okay.
Is how ranking is done.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I think we need to understand. There's someone noise in the background. There is
microphones.
There is something that we must understand about Kenya, that when Kenya is being ranked, there are some basics that actually Kenya is deemed to be beyond. We should not be talking about them as Kenya, because if you look at the media industry in Kenya, if you compare it with other countries, you will find that Kenya is way ahead. So there are some things that actually it is expected that the growth of the media industry in Kenya should not be happening in Kenya. Attacks actually is only one aspect of ranking, because there are 7 factors that are used to rank a country. And Kenya, we are doing badly when it comes to the financial independence, media ownership, and political interference and government interference. Those are the areas that and still like Kenya's ranking will still not improve. So long as we still have unchecked ownership of media by politicians, our ranking will not improve. So long as the government is not investing in public service media, our ranking is not going to improve. So long as journalists are still not getting decent jobs, and I talked about decent jobs when I said that you must have a job that can guarantee you regular income. If we do not address that, our ranking will still not improve. So even if we address the issue of attacks on journalists, we do not address those other factors, our ranking will not improve. That is why I said we start having conversation around these other issues, because these are the issues that actually are pulling us back ourselves to position 116. If you are ranking us with countries like Uganda and Tanzania, where their media are still looking up to us to provide leadership, there are some basics that are not expected to be still happening in Kenya. So let us look at those other factors that are actually affecting our ranking. Thank you.
Thank you. I think aside, I know bundles are now almost running out of from our other colleagues. Bundle is also a challenge. Now, I want us to move to the next panel, but the questions remain relevant. I know quite a number of. I know we have lost Charles. The person has unfortunately had to leave because we kept. I mean, the session we are late by 1 hour, and they were going to something. But we'll continue. The other panelists are around, so I want to hand over to Christian. We go to the next panel. But what I'm saying, I know there are a number of questions, Dr. Oluchi, I've seen quite, but now, given the time, or what do you advise colleagues, democrats? We'll go to the next panel, we'll take one round of questions.
One round of questions, please.
One.
Us could go to other things.
Okay. Yeah. There are colleagues who are on the
this
panel who want to leave. So I will thank you so much, colleagues. My panel, I've enjoyed in and out, calling, seeing your faces, hearing you, getting your points and points of views. We really appreciate. Now we go to the next section. Christian Nguku, please. You are leading us in this panel. Could you kindly take over, please? Christian Nguku.
Good afternoon, colleagues, and everyone who has joined this meeting to commemorate the World Press Freedom Day for the year 2020. I'm really delighted to have listened to the exchanges that we have had throughout the morning. And now as we come into this final session, I want us to just shift our view a little bit to look at the voices from the frontline workers who are covering the COVID-19 pandemic in this country. Because this is something really strange, it's something new. It's not the kind of thing that you sit and you prepare for, like maybe you're going to go into a war zone. This happened on us, and it's very important for us to also just give some consideration for the people who have been at the front line, the details, asking the difficult questions, sometimes getting answers, sometimes not even getting answers. To welcome on our panel, we have Mr. Kevin Mutu, who is a correspondent from Siaya, KTN News. Ms. Maureen Ongala, who is a Daily Nation Kisumu Kilifi. Dr. Mercy Korir, I think you've been hearing her asking questions during the briefing. And we have who is a matter at the People Day. We will have a few, two joining the panel. A little later in the discussion, we will have Kennedy Mureithi, NTV, who is covering COVID and has actually a very unique experience which he needs to share with us. And then we will have Dina Kitui, the Executive Director, East Africa, IREX. But we are most honored to have with us Mr. Charles Owino, police spokesman with us. And because I know the kind of demand he is on right now, he's really needed in different places, but he has honored us and stayed on the discussion for the last almost 1.5 hours. And he has been following some of the issues that we have been raising. I'd like to give the opportunity to him first so that we get to hear him, and then we can continue with the discussion. In case he has to leave, we will not miss some of his reflections on covering of the frontline workers. Welcome, Mr. Owino.
Welcome, good morning, thank you. I hope it's just getting to noon.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so first of all, may I take this opportunity to thank the organizers for this good opportunity for us to discuss on the World Press Freedom Day. From where I sit, I believe that the press, men and women, have to enter transparent and reliable information to the community to ensure that peace is sustainable in an environment of democracy and human rights. And I know you're also committed to ensure that you speak the truth and you give the community the best. Unfortunately, from where I sit, I face a lot of challenges on the daily duty that I undertake. One, as an officer in charge of corporate affairs and communication in the National Police Service. You are aware that the police ought to be the #1 human rights defender, in the sense that it's the only institution that you turn to when you are offended. And many times we have had attacks on journalists, and I've also experienced personal attacks from journalists, especially when I defend matters related to police. And many times people forget that as much as I'm supposed to be fair to everyone, but also I have a duty to protect the institution that I work for. The major challenge and meet of time that duty of protecting the public and even protecting our colleagues in journalists. We have had situations where policemen have been involved in violating the rights of these journalists instead of protecting them. But my major concern is language. We ought to, every day when we talk about police violations, it is important that we restrict ourselves to individual police officers, not all police officers. Because when you say police officers are brutal, then sometimes it invokes, it kind of has a negative impact on officers who are doing the right thing. And we are lucky that after the promulgation of the Constitution 2010, we managed to get a civilian oversight authority oversight over the police. And when we get complaints against police, it is important that we make use of these oversight authorities to ensure those individual police officers are punished accordingly and to deter. Equally, you must remember that police is the tool of the executive. It's what the executive uses to instill discipline. And sometimes in our democracies, situations may arise where police officers may take instructions that may appear to you to be negative. And at times they are simply doing work according to instructions of the institution that they work for. For example, if it is decided that people be dispersed, but a few people may also take advantage to do things that are not right. Otherwise, I would want to take this opportunity to thank all of you that have cooperated with us, that have worked with us throughout the year to ensure that we achieve our objective. And I'm sure that I'll get a lot of, every day I'll have to get a lot of criticism, especially concerning individual police officers that end up doing wrong things. But it's important that we cooperate, we work together, we try to support one another. We will try our level best to support you. And we have cases where journalists have been offended and reports have been made to us, and we have always taken action that is positive. The only thing that I would discourage is a situation where we all attack the police in generality without referring to specific officers. We are about 150,000 police officers. If one officer attacks you, please let us deal with that officer and ensure that we deal with him thoroughly. Where we don't deal with an officer who has committed an offense against a journalist or any other Kenyan, that is where we ought to be concerned and raise the issues. Why are you not taking action against this officer? But if we have an opportunity that we get the complaint appropriately and we take action against the officer, then please let us not generalize and accuse all the 120,000 police officers because they get discouraged and maybe they feel they are targeted. Otherwise, I wish you a good day, and I wish that we continue working together as we have always done. I'm open to criticism. At times, I'm very tough protecting the image of the police because that is my duty, that is what I'm paid for. And at times, it may piss you, but you should get to understand that I'm simply doing my work. Thank you. I'm aware I'll get more questions. I think from questions, you can engage me and I answer more.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Owino. I'm just hoping that you can hold on a little bit so that we can hear one or two other of the panelists who will be brief, and then we can take questions. I can already see there's a number of questions that have been raised, especially regarding the handling of the COVID coverage with regard to how the police conducted themselves as the journalists were also trying to do their duty. Maybe you could just make a comment on that before you go. But before we give you the opportunity for questions, I would like to ask Ken Bosire, are you there? Ken Bosire, and managing editor at People Daily.
Yes, Christine. Good afternoon, colleagues.
Hi, Ken.
Can you hear
yes,
me?
Ken. You could.
Can you hear
yes, me? We can hear you, Ken.
Good afternoon.
I want to just suggest that you do like maybe just 1.5 or 2 minutes comments. If you have been listening to what Mr. Charles Owino has spoken to us, he has raised some few issues of the language that we use and sometimes how the journalists conduct themselves when they cover some of these events where they are together with the police or security agents. Maybe you can make some comments there as a managing editor and actually a journalist of many, many years.
Yes, thank you very much, Christine. And just before I make a comment on what Christine has talked about, I'd like, first of all, to pay my condolence to our colleague who lost his life this morning on a day like this, that we are celebrating press freedom and then he falls in under very tragic circumstances. Two, I think also to laud our own journalists who have been out in the field, in the front line, doing what they're doing under very difficult circumstances. Some working under extreme levels of pressure and a lot of work around the clock to make sure that they do the news. Having said that, I think the relationship, the coverage out there, the newsroom in time of COVID is very difficult. The problems that have been building up in the industry, the problems that we've been about that have been dealt with in the industry for a while have just been magnified because of the uniqueness of the pandemic. The police have this new law, the instrument of curfew, which they're using to harass people. They're using when you do the enforcement. You've got some journalists who have been caught up in the process of trying to cover the story, get the story. And those incidences, I know everyone was working under very unique conditions, but it's been particularly very difficult for journalists, especially going to cover those incidences where the police are also trying to do their thing, and we end up getting caught up in between. And the police sometimes don't want to listen to what we do. They do not, some of them do not seem to appreciate what we do. Having said that, I think there is a ground where we have a point of intersection that we all know that we are serving the public, and the police have to understand. And that's why we keep asking, what happened to the reforms that were happening in the police force? That it's in the police service. It changed from a force to a service where we all serve the public. We have a common good for the good of the public. But sometimes, in many of these cases, we don't see them coming through. There are still some of them with a mentality of being a force, brutalizing, enforcing, using the cane. And that is where the disconnect is. And I think it has been particularly difficult, especially in the times of lockdown and trying to get all these measures that the government has rolled out, that the police are supposed to be working with everybody else to facilitate and help the public be safe. But sometimes they become the threat themselves. And journalists working under very unique circumstances have also, some of them are working under very stressed conditions. Some of them are suffering pay cuts, some of them are suffering many other threats that we have had through the morning. And it is this psychological thing that we need to look at, the financial threats and everything else, that as you deal with this person, you're not dealing with just a normal human being in a normal situation. And I think this is where we need to have a proper discussion, and the police have to be more restrained in the way they do this thing. Because COVID is a threat to us, it's a threat to everybody, and even to the police. They're not immune from this aspect. So they cannot protect us more than we are trying to protect everybody else. But we can work and create information and synergies where we can work together. But Mr. Wino, I think a question that needs to address is what happened to the reforms? We're increasingly seeing a police service that is very hypersensitive. Working at the slightest provocation, they lash out with all manner of brutal weapons. And this is a concern to many of us. And it's not just, they're not isolated cases. They're across the country. We have many journalists going out there who are being abused in the course of doing their work. And this is a matter that we cannot just wish away and say that they're individuals. There are too many cases that to be ranked as individual cases. Thanks.
Christine, your mic is off. Kindly, Christine, your microphone is off.
Yes, it's off. We can't get you, Christine.
Christine, kindly.
Your mic is off, Christine.
We are struggling to listen or get what Christine is saying. Kindly, Christine.
Oh, I apologize. Thank you very much, Mr. Bosire, for your remarks. I'm sure Mr. Owino has picked up some of the issues that have been raised by Ken Bosire, and probably some of the concerns some of you have had, and you are wanting to just get to hear some comments from him. I want to pick Dr. Mercy Korir, who has been covering most of the briefings. especially the daily briefings that are happening in Nairobi and a few of the other stories surrounding COVID. And I'm sure she has had her own experiences in terms of being a frontline worker. Dr. Masikari, are you there? Maybe you can take some 2 minutes. You can take some 2 minutes. Yes, I see you there.
Yeah, yes, I am, Christine. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I think we find ourselves in a very unique situation as journalists in this particular century, where the last pandemic of this nature was actually slightly over 100 years ago. So as journalists in this century, I think we find ourselves in a very unique position, but I see it more as a privileged position where we are the bridge between government and what government is saying and to the public. And that bridge, as you know, like any other bridge, is very critical. If the bridge cannot carry certain weight, then everyone else collapses and there'll be a breakdown of communication. So I think as journalists, we're in a very privileged position, and that's how I say it. From covering COVID, it's been a unique situation, and I think my experiences, I can sum them up maybe in like 3 points. The first one is making reference to Article 35, where as journalists, as media, we should have access to information. And in this case, at the beginning of this pandemic particularly, getting information from the government was one of the most important things. Government was a very critical news source, but I found it very strange when I looked at what our country was doing, and then you compare with countries in the global north that had experienced this situation before. When I looked at the WHO, for example, where those people there were more willing to provide information to journalists, explain to journalists, take their time, really struggling to get information, even credible information. And the way we handled it was more like a security issue other than a public health issue. And in a public health situation like we are in now, information is very important, because it's that information getting to the public that will then make the public do certain behavior changes that are necessary in containing this particular pandemic. So I found that very difficult, but now as time goes by, I think government has slowly realized that they do not hold monopoly of information, and unlike before where you really had to get some really deep and credible sources, at least now there's a bit of access, though it's still hard. I compare it with pulling teeth. It's still very difficult to get information from government because we are handling this as if it's privileged. Maybe it's because of how government is structured, or maybe they are afraid of quote unquote being misquoted, misreporting and things like that. But I feel like if government and media worked together properly, then we would have proper ways of relaying information and triggering the kind of public health response that we'd like. The second one, still related to information, is could be there's a credible reason that this was or is a matter of national importance. There's Public Health Act that was invoked, but that you find that only one office, and we know how Kenya works, where an office is quote unquote equated to the officer in that office. So getting access, for example, to the isolation centers in government was a tall order. It was very difficult. Then when you go to officers, they take you round and round in circles, or you're looked at as if you're just trying to poke holes and, paint the government in negative light. They sideline you. And I found that one was quite unfair, because as journalists, we are representatives of the people also. We are not asking this information because we want to sit pretty with it and have it in our houses. Or have it in our notebooks. We are asking this information because it's information that our viewers, our readers, our listeners are asking for. So as journalists, when we ask questions or when we want access to certain facilities or to certain things within government, then there's reason for it because there's a need or there's a demand from the public. The other one is I tend to see that our news sources, particularly those in government, tend to personalize issues. If I ask a question as Dr. Masi Korir, then it is taken as if it's Dr. who's asking the question. They do not see it as a question of public interest. Let's say, for example, I ask about how many tests have we done as a country. Then they look at as if I am the one asking, not that I have an assignment that my editors have given me. I have a work output to do, and at the end of the day, this is information that our readers, listeners, and viewers are looking for. There's a certain way we want to package our stories, we want to frame our stories. So by us asking these questions and doing some of these things, it is not from a personal point of view, but because it is a matter of public interest. And this, I think, later, as we were speaking with David earlier on today, the CEO, is that this leads to easy victimization of journalists or reporters who are going about their work, because if news sources don't see you as representing a bigger group and they see you as an individual, then it's easy to victimize journalists, and it's easy to, sideline certain journalists because you're seen as if you're asking the tough questions, you're asking hard questions, you're poking too much, then you're seen as one person instead of a professional, or you're carrying out your professional duty, which I find very unfair and very limiting people who are going about their duties in reporting. COVID-19 to me has exposed a certain need that as media we are supposed to look at more keenly, and this is the need to have specialized reporting in the newsrooms. Here we had so many things to grapple with at the same time. One, a public health emergency, which became a pandemic, and then which became an epidemic. Into a pandemic. On top of that, virus don't understand. Then you have all this manner of studies, some unverified, some non-randomized, some limited sampling size, and you find if a study has been done on a very limited cohort of people, then we put it in the headlines, it has very huge public health implications. For example, the story on chloroquine, that it could be a potential cure, hydroxychloroquine. What we saw is that people went and bought hydroxychloroquine off the shelves. I remember some of my relatives in the village calling me to ask me if they should buy the medicine because wamesikia ini dawa ya coronavirus. And that was quite unfortunate because the consequence was there are people whose lives depend on it. And these are people who have rheumatoid arthritis, some with lupus. These are people who depend on it. And then when you go back to the supply chain of the drug in the country, you find that this drug is, because the demand for it is not so high, it is not brought into the country in large quantities. So what happened immediately was that there was a shortage of this particular drug to those who need it to live every day. So for me, this pandemic or this situation that we are in is a point for media owners, for stakeholders in media to do a bit of introspection and start putting money in having specialized desks, particularly for health, so that by the time anything goes out, whether it's a big story, it's a small story, how we treat our stories has had some more serious thinking around it because of the consequences that it would otherwise have. I remember the coronavirus is just here. Going forward, there'll be a lot of health issues that will have been affected from this, that will come from this, and there'll be a lot of things to discuss in health. So it will not just be the end of once we are, let's say, once we're in a safe space from the coronavirus, it will not just be the end, but it will be a time for us to now scale up from reporting the coronavirus to having specialized desks, not just for health, but also looking at other things like finance and economy, for example, that will interrogate issues so that we start giving audiences quality information, quality content, and not a matter of he said, she said, without really analyzing and thinking and looking through this. Granted that there are media houses that have done this, and I think for me, the journalists who have been keeping on doing health reporting, if you read their stories versus those that were just thrown into the deep end when the COVID started, you'd see a very big difference, because those that have been doing health have had a lot of time to really grow, build sources, build networks, understand issues, interrogate issues, and they've had a very good coverage. So I think it's time, and from my own experience, to really look at how we are covering health, to reconsider it so that we do not have the challenges that we have been seeing so far. And lastly, I think my colleagues have done an excellent job, in my opinion, because we have all found ourselves in strange times, strange environments where we hardly understand anything. Things are changing on a day-to-day basis. Big terms are coming in, small terms are coming in, and we need to break all this so that we do our audiences a good job. And I think, granted the situation and the circumstances we are in, I think my colleagues have done an excellent job in trying to, keep everyone informed and well versed with the situation as is. Christine.
Thank you, Dr. Korir. Challenging times among perhaps even journalism profession. Some of the gaps that you have highlighted are actually food for thought for professional practice, and also for the quality of information and how we conduct ourselves as journalists. I want to now go into the counties and speak with Kevin Ogutu. Kevin Ogutu, Siaya, correspondent, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much, Christine.
Okay, maybe you can make 2 to 3 minutes of some comments from your experience covering COVID out there in a county far away from Nairobi, the capital, where the briefings actually happen every day and you probably have to look for information differently.
Yes, very well put, Christine. And talking of coverage of COVID-19 outside Nairobi, where we do have the daily briefings, on the 12th of April, we had the first fatal case of COVID-19. A patient, a 59-year-old James Oyugi, passed on and was buried in a style that has never been witnessed in Luo, Nyanza. So there was a serious uproar. He was buried somewhere at dawn on Sunday, and by Monday, there was a video that was really circulating, went viral, that like a 1.5 minute to 2 minutes video showing the manner in which his body was interred. So given that I'm based in Kisumu and I cover Nyanza region, this was a very serious story that needed a proper follow-up. And on Monday, the 13th of April, we set out from Kisumu, and our assignment was very brief. What we call accountability journalism. We wanted to find out from the leadership of Siaya County what exactly happened, the details of this particular kind of burial. At what point did this guy pass on? At what point were the samples taken? At what point did the results come out? And at what point was this decision made to bury him in that style? So the rest is history. But remember, after the brief by the interview by Siaya Governor Corridor Sanga, in my mind, though this was not part of the assignment, but I was like, my viewers would be wondering what this particular home looks like. So given that we had got information that every other family member, close relative, had been picked for a forced quarantine, given that they'd been in touch with the deceased, we thought it is necessary that we could also get to the home and get from. But unfortunately, as we reported in our story, we found 2 family members, a sister of the deceased and a son, and now the rest is history. Because while we were carrying out the interviews, everyone was in agreement, from my bosses and also from my colleagues, that we could have been exposed to the virus, given that we had interviewed the son to the deceased, who was a primary contact. So this was, I thought that when I report from my own experience, it became so bad because later on we had got this information reaching even where being stigmatized. Everyone thought that this family of Kevin Ogutu must be having the COVID-19. So that I came to learn because of having been involved in this kind of scenario. And I have got something for my colleagues because since we don't know for how long this is going to last, whenever we are making these reports, I know it is news, when we have got particularly who is suspected to be having the COVID-19. But it is important also that when we are talking about feedback, when at least these people have been tested negative, it's very important that we also relay this particularly with the prominence we gave it when it first broke out. Because apparently we are very fast to announce the cases, the positive cases, or those who've been put into quarantine, or those who've been in contact, or from the contact sourcing and all that. But we get very slow in reporting even this kind of follow-up stories with regards to the coverage of COVID-19, such that when it was announced that, for example, Christine was in contact with Kevin Ogutu, who is suspected COVID-19, suspected to have the COVID-19 virus. Then upon the tests, we need also to, when it turns out to be negative, we also need to communicate this so that this particular information will reach the very audience that got the prior information. Otherwise, I must also thank my colleagues from Nairobi and also in the counties who are doing the best that they can, from the daily briefs to other related stories talking about the survivors in the slums, the economy, the COVID curfew economy, and every other story ideas and story items that we've had ever since this pandemic became part of our lives.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It's a really interesting perspective of the coverage of that barrio, which I'm actually beginning to see a different angle, because I had never got direct information of how that whole matter was handled. Still, some few things still remain cloudy. That is discussion for another day. But I now want to go down to Kilifi. Maureen Ongala, Daily Nation, are you there? Maureen, are you there?
Yes, Christine, I'm here.
If you can speak just a little louder, and then just make some remarks on your experience covering COVID-19. You may not need to go into very deep details, because we may soon run out of time to actually open the discussion to everybody who is on the platform. So if you can just make it, really summary. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Christine. On my part, like I can say, it has been a challenge, and a really challenge. And for example, for the first time when we were quarantined, like half of Kilifi journalists were quarantined after our deputy governor was reported to be having coronavirus. So it was traumatizing for some of us. Like me, myself, I was in quarantine, and some of my colleagues were in quarantine. So it was difficult and challenging for us now that the stories are out and you're supposed to go out. And when you go outside there, everyone knows you are a journalist, and they're like, hey, wait, hata hujapimwa, and tulisikia ulikuwa kwa press briefing ya governor. So some of us, like me, I used to stay at home. So we couldn't go out, we're just like indoors, so we used phones. And at times when it came to accessing information where we needed to meet the county officials, it was a bit challenging. You see? Now that you can't move out and they are calling for a press briefing, they want to give out their statement, you can't access the information. It was a bit challenging. And I can say that after the 14-day quarantine, it has been a bit smooth, despite it being that tough in the first place. But everything is now fine, and we are really working to see that we deliver our best. Christian.
Thank you very much, Maureen. I'm sure you found yourself in the most difficult situation. Here is a story that you're following, and now you have to start to think, how have I interacted with the source of information, and how has that affected me now at a totally different level where it's now a personal issue